You don't have to be a millennial to be socially savvy. We believe anyone can join Generation Social Media, and your journey starts now. This is the Generation Social Media Podcast by Chatterkick.
Welcome to another edition of Generation Social Media Podcast. I'm so excited. Today we have our guest, Adam Lindheim, with Curastory, and he is going to share with us a little bit today about influencer marketing and maybe even some sales tactics he's learned along the way. So Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Beth. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to join you today.
Well, before we get started, why don't you just give a little bit of an introduction about yourself and maybe even an interesting fact that someone may not know about you.
I love this game. So my name is Adam Lindheim. I'm the head of sales and business development at Curastory. My career is pretty unique. I started in CPG, working at Unilever. I spent time in Rogers, Arkansas, which I'm sure everyone can guess the major retailer I called against. And then I actually spent some time within data and particularly in the beverage alcohol industry. So definitely if you ever need a recommendation on a tequila, I'm your guy. And then I started getting into the startup world. So I've worked at a couple different startups, primarily in a sales or commercial strategy focused type role. I joined the Curastory team a couple months ago. And I now lead our sales and business development function. So we're a seed stage startup led by an amazing founder, and Tiffany Kelly. We're really about trying to disrupt or innovate in the creator economy space and really bring brands into a new opportunity and how to engage with the creator economy. And so really excited to talk a little bit more today about what's going on in the influencer marketing space, as well as how brands can really assess and understand where the opportunities exist. An interesting fact about myself, I have lived in every single time zone in the US. So wow. I know I may look young. I have a baby face, no doubt about it. But I have lived in every single US time zone and proud of it.
That's awesome. So I'm really interested to know, obviously when you work in sales for a startup, you have to have passion about the product and about what you're trying to accomplish, to change and, like you said, disrupt an industry. What really attracted you to the Curastory story, no pun intended, if you will, and tell us a little bit about the software and really what it does.
Yeah, so I started, well, first thing was obviously I'm a huge sports fan. So for better or worse, my wife hates it. I'm obsessed with sports, always have been. Earliest memories are some live sporting events, playing sports with my dad and my brother. And so immediately once you kind of learn a little bit about Curastory, there's no doubt that athletes, primarily really big name athletes, are part of the ecosystem, as well as you learn a little bit more to that more micro, nano level type of content creator. As I kind of started interviewing and getting to know the C-suite team a little bit better, I'll literally never forget, Beth. I'm standing in the elevator of my building in Brooklyn, New York, and I see a young food delivery guy watching a piece of video content on YouTube. And it was in that moment things started really to click for me where, listen, I've already cut cable myself. I watch TV, whether it's YouTube TV or Netflix and Hulu, I'm streaming, right? But there's that whole other new generation that's coming up that's consuming content in a number of different ways. I even notice in terms of my content consumption, it is more, shorter videos on Instagram or Twitter that I'm sharing with friends. And it was in that moment things clicked for me, and that the way in which we're going to consume content in the future is going to evolve. More likely than not, there's particular content creators that are driving the viewership. And so I ultimately made the leap to join the Curastory team. And what the platform really does is essentially taking what influencer marketing has historically been and creating a programmatic advertising approach, creating a demand side platform. So influencer marketing, which is a little bit of a dirty word where we work, we really view as content creators, can be done at scale. And so what we have found, particularly in the Curastory ecosystem, is that very similar to audio advertising or podcasting, there's a ton of really great content creators that exist out there, and fans and subscribers and followers that tune in every time a new piece of content is posted. And so we want those creators to continue to focus on that content, but provide an opportunity for brands to obviously sponsor that content so creators can monetize what it is they do so well. But also we know from the data that we see on the back end, organic content, particularly in native ad reads in the voice of the content creator, are some of the best performing ROAS digital strategy campaigns that we've seen. So it's really bringing that mindset as well as this new approach to digital marketing that we're really passionate about here at Curastory.
I love that. And for all the people that do not follow the digital marketing slang, can we break a couple of those things down? So first of all, I want to know your definition, and this could be defined multiple places, as what is the difference between influencer marketing and a content creator? Because I think there's a lot of brands that are struggling with how to even get their brain around this stuff, as well as these other terms that are floating out there, nano influencers or micro or what's smaller than that, right? So tell me how you define some of those and the differences.
Absolutely. And Beth, first thing I'm going to do is apologize to the audience. I got caught up in my passion.
It's all good.
Terms, but it is so new. So I think the first place to start, I don't think people realize, or maybe they do, influencer marketing is a $13.8 billion industry. It has absolutely exploded. And influencer marketing has become this catch-all for really what we all term as someone promoting a product on social media. What's really interesting, even just this week, my wife and my mother and I were watching that show, Inventing Anna, on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure so many people are topical at this point in time. And so much of that is about social influence. And so influencer marketing in and of itself, like this word that people hear, is really about someone influencing their following in some sort of way, indicating that it's some sort of sponsored post, telling them to go buy something. And so generally what we see is standard influencer marketing, how we interpret it here at Curastory, is a static post that promotes a product. What we've seen, and there's this new evolution that's occurring, is content creators. So content creator is more focused on building content that's engaging for the audience. It's not necessarily promotional, right? But it's something that they're producing every day that creates a higher level of engagement. A content creator can very well be an influencer, but generally an influencer is not as much of a content creator because they're more focused on maybe just promoting products. What I will say is that the people that are going to be very successful in influencer marketing are going to naturally become great content creators because that's what's going to steal our share of eyeballs, ears, what we're ultimately consuming. To take two steps backwards, there's different tiers of influencers that exist out there. The first and the lowest level would be nano. So nano is someone that has a very, very small following. They may not even consider themselves even an influencer, but they are very passionate about a product or brand. We generally see a nano influencer get seeded product. So a brand will send them something for free and not even necessarily ask for a post, but they'll do so, or maybe there is some agreement in place and that post goes live on social, and they kind of hope that it has that effect that their inner circle is very enticed or interested in what that person's posting about, and kind of creates that spread like wildfire type level of influence within that community. Then there's that micro level where they're definitely, you can tell immediately this person's very interested in what their profile looks like, what their content looks like. They're not so big that, you would recognize them on the street, or maybe someone that you could talk about at the dinner table and everyone would recognize, but they definitely have a larger level of influence. We generally see them in that 10 to 20,000 range, maybe even 40 as a ceiling. And those people generally have some sort of pay for post type model, right? They definitely know they have a level of influence and they're asking for something in return to post. We then get into that macro range where now you're talking like very sizable following. Generally, they're probably someone pretty famous. There's definitely a level of a transaction that goes on, probably much larger. And then the last is mega, which is start thinking of LeBron James, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, the names that we are accustomed to seeing on TV.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. And with this podcast specifically, Generation Social Media, we like to throw out all of the myths and misconceptions about influencer marketing. And I think for us at Chatterkick, I think one of the biggest things that it's broken is the fact that somebody can have influence over their communities, the people that they're connected with, but maybe they're just not naturally good at creating content, right? Like they'll take a picture of something and they'll just put it out there and it will sell out. But there are also people that are amazing at putting content. They are a creative person. They create this beautiful piece of content, but maybe they are not great at influencing, or maybe they can influence people to get interested, but they're not going to influence in the purchase process. So I think, and tell me what your thoughts are on this, I really do feel like influencer marketing is like the wild, wild west right now. Brands are throwing product and money and no money, and then it's all unfair at a lot of these content creators, and vice versa. The content creators and influencers, they need to get paid for their value that they're bringing to the table, but they don't know how to market it, price it, sell it, coordinate it, sustain it, right? It's kind of like running your own little business.
Beth, you hit it on the nose. It's absolutely the wild, wild west. I think one of the stories that has resonated most with me recently, and this was just, again, I'm a Twitter nerd, self-admitted, right? But there was someone that was out there that was asking like, hey, there's a influencer on TikTok, and she's asking for $3,000 to whitelist her account. She asked her entire Twitter following, like, is this too much? Is this not enough? Like, just really trying to understand, like, is this appropriate? And I was honestly shocked, or I guess I shouldn't say necessarily shocked, but there were a lot of people that work in the space that were basically saying like, hey, don't pay her the $3K, steal her content, see product with people for free, and you'll get the same type of return in your investment. And so I've seen both sides of this, right? Listen, at the end of the day, we're all in business. There's no question that we're always going to look at our bottom line and how can we save costs and how can we do things more efficiently and effectively. At the same time, on the creator side, there is an element of like some creators are kind of cutting each other off at the ankles, right? The people that are seeding product today and hurting that person that was offered $3K is one day going to be that person that wants $3K and now is not getting that money. And now they're like, how do I put a roof over my head? And honestly, where I think the answer to all of this exists is, of course, in data and transparency.
Right.
There are companies out there that exist, and again, not even trying to necessarily self-promote Curastory, but there are companies that are starting to build algorithms that can really understand what the effectiveness of a influencer creator type campaign can drive. And one thing that I believe, and the team at Curastory believes, is that I think a brand is willing to pay a creator or an influencer their fair share if they can fully see that they've driven conversions or awareness or whatever those KPIs that are put in place. And I think on the same side, creators are very open, like, hey, I believe in myself. I'm willing to bet on myself. I won't take money up front if I know I'll get paid fairly for what I ultimately drive. And so I think and I know this is probably somewhere we'll get to at the end, but where we're moving to is some form of an agreeable, transparent portal of data where creators and influencers can get paid fairly for what they actually drive. And brands also are not taken for a wild ride because the influencer says, I'm worth $20K a month, and now they're lazy and it's a terrible post and it drives nothing and there's no way to hold them accountable. So that is where I really think we're moving to, is that ability to provide that transparency. But everyone's running a million miles per hour. A lot of people have been burnt, right?
Yeah.
Or some people have had really great experiences. And so everyone's going so quickly that I think with due time, we'll see things evolve into kind of where I think we'll end up.
Yeah, I think we saw the same thing happen with the social platforms as the technology of the platforms was evolving. And even now more so because all the traceability and trackability, and in the advertising world, we use attribution models. But with the iOS changes and a lot of the privacy things coming into place, there is also a cost to measure, and there's a cost to take it, the opportunity to get in this space of influencer or creator marketing. What do you think that the first step that if brands want to do this, and I'm talking about mid-sized brands, doesn't have to be a huge company with lots of different marketing people in-house, but so many people that are in business, small, or mid-size, or large, want to quote unquote do social or influencer marketing, and they don't know what to do next. Like, I want to go find influencers. I want to go find content creators. I want to pay them fairly. They have all well intentions, but they don't know what the next step is. What do you think the first step is for many of these companies?
It's such a good question. Honestly, it really, and we'll address it as a mid-sized company, because I think there's definitely a difference between even mid-sized companies where some have brought performance marketing in-house.
Right.
So they have teams to have visibility, and some are like, hey, this is not a strength of ours, we want to go to an agency.
Right.
I think regardless, what you want to ultimately find is a efficient process to engage with influencers or content creators, right? One of the things that we know to be the biggest challenge is hand-to-hand outreach to influencers or content creators that then moves to negotiation, right? That then moves to creator management, which then leads to fact checking and making sure the content goes out on time, which then ultimately leads to a billion different data sources right. to measure, right? So the best recommendation I can make is, one, work with a group or an organization, whether it's internal, external, that has access to platforms that can do this at scale for you, right? Because I don't think a lot of companies realize is that the resource drain on running influencer marketing, if not done effectively, is immeasurable, right? Like if you actually, the only way to actually understand it is the number of, if everyone wrote out their hours, if you do time tracking to see how much time they put toward your influencer marketing campaign, and then map back to what your ultimate ROI looked like, I guarantee a lot of business leaders would be very sick to their stomach. So that would be is find either, whether it's internally or relying on an agency, platforms that can do this for you at scale and deliver you the insights so you feel comfortable. The second element that I absolutely would recommend to everyone is definitely prioritize video. So look for platforms that are obviously working with content creators or, again, influencers, depending on how you define them, that are prioritizing video content. There is a data metric out there that indicates that the internet traffic, 82% of internet traffic in 2022 is going to be dominated by video. And there's a reason for that, is that those videos are what's most shareable amongst friends and family, and B, is what grabs attention. And so wherever you go to find your influencers, your content creators, definitely make sure there is a form of video that is embedded into your campaign and strategy. It's the best way to tell a story, and it's the best way to capture those eyeballs. So those would be the two major things I would prioritize. Ultimately, whether it's done in-house or with your agency, you want to have a strategy, right? Who are we targeting? What type of story are you trying to tell? But I feel like those are maybe table stakes when it comes to what the plan looks like as you go to market.
But, I do think that that's a good point, because there are some brands, especially if you're not in marketing, that you forget the basics. You forget about real people being human, saying thank you. There are accounts out there that I watch and view all the time that basically screenshot what these brands are sending to them as influencers or as content creators. And it's horrendous. Like, we're not being kind to each other. We're not shaking hands, introducing ourselves. So many people are just trying to do this and shove product down people's throats. And so I think it's really important that you do maintain that level of respect and humanity, and making sure that you're being, a human on the other end of that Instagram DM or however you're reaching out to that creator.
Oh, Beth, I could talk for hours about humanity, but I don't know if that's why people are tuning in. What I will say, to your point, and kind of going back full circle in terms of like what you should be thinking about as you start to think about influencers and content. I know we can maybe talk a little bit difference between organic and sponsored, but I would, as you think about what draws people's eyeballs to social media and videos, is think about helping your creators, influencers produce engaging content. And the reason why I say that is whether it's organic or it is sponsored, the creators generally, when you give them that creative freedom to kind of come up with what's going to tell the story, that's when you get the best results, because these people are trained and paid to, like, in some ways, it's how they monetize their career, to produce content. And so again, I come from a world of CPG. I totally understand brand management, making sure we stay within brand guidelines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what I always found is the brands that tend to let the creators or the podcasters or the influencers have that creative bandwidth, those are the ads that go viral. Those are the things that people start sharing around, because it's not the brand manager, and again, no offense to that brand manager, that lives and breathes the brand every day. If you asked me if you could take and tell Curastory's story, I'm sure the first 2 months, Beth, would be me being like, how are you telling this? How are you telling that? Because it's my baby. It's what I care about. But I think ultimately, as we allow the creators to tell their story with more creative freedom, you'll see better results.
Yeah, I think that also brings up a good point, that find creators and influencers that align with what you're trying to do and how you're trying to position your product. It's really kind of risky to go completely just because someone's famous, but they may not have, maybe in some past content, they talked about how they disliked something that you're selling, or there's just a lot of that feels fake, and people can see right through it, and it's not going to be as well performing of a campaign.
Absolutely. They have to be bought in, or it has to feel organic, whether it's sponsored or organic content to begin with. I think it's really important that people don't see through the influencer or the creator and be like, oh, this person's just getting paid for this. I think that's a really good call out by you. And again, as someone that lives and breathes it, it seems obvious, but again, I can totally understand if like you're not doing it every day. You're like, see the bright, shiny name and get really excited. And then you look at the content and it's like, everyone's going to see right through this. And that's never a good result.
Exactly. So the next thing I want to talk a little bit about, just tell me, again, we break a lot of barriers. Who are some of the influencers that you follow, and maybe some that people wouldn't guess? Because I do think that this is not just a young person's game in terms of like who's consuming content from influencers or content creators, who's actually creating the content. If anybody's been on TikTok recently, you will see there is grandma and grandpas creating the content as well as very young people. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So honestly, I'm going to plug a brand actually that the executive team are content creators themselves, and they create content every day on LinkedIn to promote their brand that's around their business. The name of the company is Midday Squares. They are out of Canada. And what I love about what they do is they've essentially almost created this behind the scenes MTV show of them building their business. And what that really provides insight to is like, you get to connect with these business owners, and they're showing you so much behind the scenes, and they're so transparent. And I remember someone commented on their LinkedIn. It was like, there were 3 things of content that this person watched. It was The Wire, Scott Van Pelt on ESPN, and Midday Squares on LinkedIn. And I thought that was so funny because their content is that good. I know their COO, Nick Saltarelli, decently well. We got to know each other as I've kind of built out the sales and business development function here at Curastory. And Nick has a really interesting background himself, has a lot of very interesting views. You can follow him on Twitter at Nick Salto, and he's always talking about ownership, entrepreneurship, a lot of different elements of what they go through. And again, I think that what is most interesting about their content is that it's real and it's engaging. And it's not really just like, hey, let me just show you my product or brand, talking about the benefits of the product or brand. It's like something that you're invested in their everyday well-being of their business. And it's some of the best I've honestly seen, whether it's just on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Twitter. And it's just hilarious enough that it's LinkedIn, which generally you don't think of as influencer. But there is a lot of influencers that are growing in the LinkedIn space. So that's one that really stands out to me. I'm sorry, go ahead. It seems like you were going to ask.
I think that's awesome. And I think that's a really good tip and takeaway for businesses that are feeling a little lost. First of all, you may have content creators and influencers within your business. Like, they don't have to have millions and millions of fans and followers. Look inward first, especially if you're in B2B or you don't need to service or sell to every single person and you have a niche market. And then the second tip I would give you is look at your first degree of contacts. Maybe it's a friend that you had that's just amazing at creating content, or maybe it's some of your best customers. They could also be in that space and you just don't realize it.
Absolutely. And Beth, even to piggyback on that, I find it so interesting. Maybe people know this or they don't, but oftentimes we do rely on people inside of our organization to spread awareness of our product or brand. And I always find it so amazing in some places that work, you don't even have the people that work there liking the content. Mm-hmm. And so for anyone that's not familiar with how social media works, the more likes and engagement pieces of content get, the more it comes to the top of people's feeds. So like advice I would give is like, hey, if you're going to post stuff on your LinkedIn feed, again, never require anyone to do something they don't want to do. But if everyone in your company is like, we need to go win today, we need to drive awareness, we need to drive business growth, it's very simple just to like your coworkers' post or like your own posts or the company's post, and have everyone do that because it will drive more eyeballs, more views on that particular post. And so everywhere I go, I talk about this all the time. We need to be ambassadors of our own business, right? And again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that everyone loves what they do and everyone wants to be Superman for their business, but it is important that like, if we're not going to represent our own brand and talk about our own business, why would anyone else? And so I think it always does start internally. And then to your point, as you grow that excitement, you never know who's like sitting next to you or perpendicular to your business that's also willing to give you a plug and is a great content creator. So I think it's really important to call out, and I love that you made that mention.
Awesome. So before we end, one thing I wanted you to share, your secrets to cold outreach, because fun fact, Adam sent me a completely cold email and I get hundreds of them probably a day. And for some reason that one caught my eye and I said, fine, you got me. We can jump on a sales call. You're building a sales team there at Curastory, you mentioned, and software sales is brutal. It's intense. My husband was in that space for a while. Can you tell us some of the things that you've learned that maybe other people could use as a takeaway as it relates to sales and cold outreach specifically?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is I'm learning every day. I've been doing it for a while and I'm consistently still learning new things. I don't think we're open enough to learning more, right? Like I'm the first one to tell you, I tell people on my team now, I don't have all the answers, but you have to be willing to A/B test. Very similar to social media campaigns.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Try different elements and see what works, what sticks, what doesn't. The other thing I would say is you got to have tough skin. Don't have tough skin, this is not the game for you. People are going to tell you very mean and rude things in their responses. All you got to know is that at the end of the day, you're doing the best you can. Some advice I would give anyone, and I tell this to everyone on my team, even if someone says no, even if someone is rude, it is always important to respond and tell them, thank you for taking the time to respond to your email, right? If they say something particular that might be interesting, even with their no, if you can speak to it and still maybe take that one last shot to see if you can grab their interest, it's worth it, but don't overwrite. 1 or 2 sentences, basically saying, hey, I'm really sorry if this was bothersome. I thought maybe based off your business model and the services you offered, this might be interesting, but totally understand and will respect your inbox going forward. Best wishes in 2022 and beyond. And I think when you do that, you humanize yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of people, and I would probably be almost too passionate about this, and Beth, you could probably speak to it a little bit in your own business, is every organization has some form of sales. So I always say, like, hey, be kind to those salespeople reaching out. You have salespeople in your organization that are doing that stuff. We know that we're not the number one person that you want to see in your inbox. But ultimately, it's our job and what we're trying to do to put a roof over our head for our families, as well as grow our business. Now, I do think it's important as a salesperson to always be respectful. So if someone doesn't want to hear from you anymore, absolutely take them off your list. Tell them you're sorry. Don't follow up. Like they made it very clear to you that they're not interested in getting more outreach. So it is on us to make sure that we are being respectful. Now, in terms of like getting that stickiness and trying to get someone to open your email and say, hey, I'm willing to engage, you got to have great copywriting skills. Mm-hmm. So can you write a headline that's going to get someone's attention, right? And again, research is really important. So how well do you know the space so that you can use buzzwords that are going to get people, and at least in my opinion, the first challenge is, will they open your email?
Right.
So do you have an email subject that's interesting enough that they'll open it? And then B, the copy contained within the email, I always like to say has some sort of research that shows that you're informed, but can apply to their business. So for Curastory, we're always trying to talk about how influencer marketing can be very inefficient, right? We have a new approach that is scalable, as well as gives you the transparency to understand what's working and what's not. So that's generally what I try to pride myself on, work with my other salespeople that work and obviously work alongside me, is work on their copywriting skills and making sure that it's enticing. Because as you said, Beth, you get hundreds of these a day. So how can you stand out? And generally, it's going to start with the subject line.
Yeah, I also think that a couple of things that drive me absolutely crazy is when people don't spell your name wrong or your name right. And that really drives me nuts when, or the company name right. I see a lot of R's like lowercase, uppercase, wonky. And then the other thing is, if you're using the same template that everybody else is using, it's obvious, right? Like you can tell the people that are using the same cold outreach templates because the emails are exactly the same. So if you're going to use a platform, a system, if you're going to use a ClickFunnels, whatever that may be, don't forget to rewrite it a little bit, because especially if you're going after people that are probably getting a lot of these, which I'm imagining many business owners are, it's very obvious that people have the same templates. I feel like I get the same ones, the same headlines every day. I'm like, I know where that one came from. I've seen it before. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm just hypersensitive to that, but that would be something that I think could be helpful.
Beth, I totally agree with you. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, sales is a numbers game. So if you are running a sales organization out there, as I always like to say, activity, it yields results, right? And so at the end of the day, as you grow your business, you'll understand what your conversion rate looks like. You'll have like a real understanding of what your expectation is in terms of getting to your goal. But still, it is very important to create some level of customization when you're doing outreach, right? That person, just like you, is going to be like, hey, this is the same cup of soup I've been getting served for however many years you've been looking at it. How can you make sure that person, or what can you do to ensure that it looks like you spent the time to write them a custom note?
Exactly.
Right? I would be remiss, and no one would believe me if I didn't say, hey, there is a level of automation that every salesperson needs to rely on, but there's ways to put people into certain buckets that can make it feel a little bit more customized, right? Taking the time to write out a campaign that you want to run so that when the person does get your outreach, it does feel customized. And again, it's not easy, right? Again, it's not for the faint of heart to do this. And you have to understand that you're definitely going to strike out. But again, as I was taught by my dad and my mom, it's all about respect, appreciating people's time. And ultimately, when you do get that opportunity, make sure that, you make the most of it. And those people know how much you value and are appreciative of them taking the opportunity or giving you that opportunity to connect with them.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for joining us today. And we really appreciated your time. I think people learned a little bit about influencer marketing and content creators, as well as some sales tactics and techniques. So we really appreciate you joining us today, and stay tuned for the next episode of Generation Social Media.
Thanks so much, guys.